Well, good evening, everybody. Let's stand to our feet. We're going to open up with prayer. We are so excited that you are here today. If you are joining on live stream, we would just like to say a special welcome. We are so blessed that you have tuned in to what God is doing here at Destiny Church. Everybody, let's just bow our heads and open up with prayer. Heavenly Father, today, this evening, we just ask that you move in our lives and tug on our hearts tonight, Jesus. Lord, your word says where two or three are gathered, there you are in the midst. And Heavenly Father, we come tonight to worship you and to give you glory. And Lord, we declare that you will reign in our community in the name of Jesus. And everybody said amen. Let's worship tonight.
I love you, Lord, for your mercy never fails me. All my days I've been held in your hands. From the moment that I wake up until I lay my head, I will sing of the goodness of God. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. I love your voice. You have led me through the fire in darkest night. You are close like no other. I've known you as a father. I've known you as a friend. And I have lived in the goodness of God. All my life, all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. Yes, with every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you all of me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. With my life laid down, I surrender now. I give you all of me. Your goodness is running after, it's running after me. And all my life you have been faithful. And all my life you have been so, so good. With every breath that I am able, I will sing of the goodness of God.
Praise the Lord, everybody. Come on, let's give the Lord a praise today. It's so good. We welcome everyone here tonight and all of you that are watching online. We're blessed to have you with us. Why don't you greet somebody around you and you could be seated. Even if you came with somebody, tell them, hi, glad you came tonight. Greet somebody and let them know you're glad to see them and you could be seated. Amen. Amen. Well, first of all, I want to just thank everybody for taking time to come to be here tonight. This is my first town hall meeting ever, so I'm kind of excited to see how it's all going to work out for us. But we're very blessed. You know, several months ago, Rick Parlente contacted me, and he and I were in my office talking. He said, I'd really like to do a pro-life event in Naples, and I'd really like to bring in Father Frank Pavone. He said, I know him well, and I'd love to bring him. And I contacted a few people and started watching some videos, and I'm like, wow, what God is doing is just so amazing. So first of all, I want to thank Rick and Chris, his wife, for helping us put this together. Rick Parlente, would you give Rick a great big hand, everybody? We're so blessed to have Rick here at Destiny Church. They've been a real blessing. And Frank Horn is the senior advisor, director for public relations with Priests for Life. And Jerry helped us. He helped put all this together. And Jerry Horn is just a great man. I've never met him, but we've talked on the phone a few times. And so we want to thank Jerry for helping us put this all together. I want to introduce some of you to, many of you already probably know our state representative, Byron Donalds, but Byron will soon be our congressman. And we are so blessed to have Byron and Erica with us. Byron, would you come on up? Amen. Byron Donalds, everybody. What a blessing to have him with us. Amen. And Byron, if you want to take that seat there, and then I'll come over here. And then our very, very special honored guest tonight, we are so blessed to have Father Frank with us. He is the leading general on pro-life, man. He is speaking all around the world and letting everybody know the truth about what's going on in our country. And he is a real general of the faith. Father Frank is one of the most prominent pro-life leaders in the world. He serves as the national director for Priests for Life, the president of the National Pro-Life Religious Council, also the national pastoral director for Silent No More Awareness Campaign, and of Rachel's Vineyard, one of the largest healing centers for those who have had abortion. And he is a great, great man of faith, and we are honored to have him with us tonight. Put your hands together and make welcome Father Frank Pavone. What a blessing, what a blessing. So good, so good. And then our special guest via Zoom, we're going to see her on the big screen here in just a minute. Vita King grew up as in the civil rights movement led by her uncle, Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. She is the daughter of the late civil rights activist leader, Reverend A.D. King, and his wife, Naomi Barber King. She's an author, an actress, a songwriter, mother of 6, grandmother. She still lives in Atlanta, but we are so blessed to have with us via Zoom Dr. Avita King. Give her a great big welcome, everybody. Oh, my goodness.
Hi, everybody.
We are so blessed to have you with us. It is a great privilege. And what we want to do is we'd like to watch a little video clip, and this will be a real blessing to everybody of Dr. Avita King.
Men will recognize that out of one blood, God made all men to dwell upon the face of the earth. Let us be dissatisfied until that day when nobody will shout white power, when nobody will shout black power, but everybody will talk about God's power and human power.
Father God, we come to Thee with joy and thanksgiving. We thank You for Your word, 'tis true, and all our love we give to You. Created to
nothing deficient. The blood of Jesus makes us one. Being of one blood makes us prolific. It's nothing mysterious or mystic. I'm just saying, if you don't see color where there's so much beauty and diversity, it's not that realistic. The things God puts in place keeps us from getting it twisted. The things man puts before God has us divided like we missed it. I mean, the class he gave on love, if you're not familiar with it, sent his only begotten Son and the Holy Spirit to kick it with it. Joseph's coat of many colors is what should be sought after. Looking at how we used to be divided by color should cause laughter. So I'm not colorblind, blind.
Not colorblind, created in living color. Not colorblind, learning to love each other.
Of one blood, God created the human race. For this is how God loved the world. He gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but will have eternal life. God sent his Son into the world, not to judge the world, but to save the world through him.
Grace and mercy, join wisdom before Almighty Creator's throne. The promise is revealed. We hear you loud and clear, giving sight to the blind. We are not colorblind. Your love shines down on us. Christ's blood delivers us from dust. You're healing one blood with your Son's blood. Now we're one blood, redeemed by grace. We are not colorblind, united in living color. Not colorblind, learning to love each other.
Wow, isn't that amazing? That is great. You got skills.
Love you. Thank you so much.
That's fresh. That's you singing too, right?
That's me singing, absolutely.
Oh
Thank
my
you
goodness.
so much.
That's wonderful. We're so blessed to have you and Father Frank with us today, and we're going to make this real, just free to jump in at any time. Both of you can share and, on any of the questions, but we're just so blessed to have you with us, and welcome to Naples, Florida, even though it's only on Zoom, but I wish you was here in person.
I wish I were there, Pastor Greg, Rick Parlante, you, your wife, your family, your ministry, to the representative. Hi, Father Frank. Hello, everybody on Zoom. I really wish I were there too. Florida's lovely, but we'll do the best we can. How about that?
Amen. And soon we'll have you back in person. We'd love to meet you. But we understand that you just wrote a new book, We're Not Colorblind. And would love to have you tell us a little bit about it. How did you get the heart of it? And tell us what the book's about.
Well, the song is inspired by the book itself. In 2017, my friend Ginger Howard and I, and Ginger and I have worked together for several years in the pro-life movement and what's called the conservative movement, certainly as Christian sisters in Christ. But in 2017, we had an opportunity to attend a couple of meetings. And one was called the Beloved Community Talks, and then the other was the Martin Luther King Holiday. And during that time, things became very heated and challenging because everybody doesn't think the same way that Ginger and I think, right? So after we made it through that experience non-violently, and we had to exercise all of our Christian principles, and Ginger had a dream after those two meetings, and she dreamed, and God showed her that we needed to do a book, to write a book together. And so Ginger called me, and within hours, God gave me the title of the book, We're Not Colorblind, Healing the Racial Divide, and the chapter outlines and everything. We wrote the book. It took us about 2 years to do what we felt was completing the book. And then we sat it down in 2019. And then we picked it back up at the beginning of this year in the midst of COVID, street riots, and all of that. And we completed the book. Interestingly enough, it made the top 100 in Christian books on Amazon within a week. It just went boom. And so you can find it at notcolorblindbook.com.
That's so exciting. And what perfect timing from the Lord, right, to give you that book. And you know, Satan, he loves to divide, and he's always trying to separate and divide us. And we've been just praying for our nation, praying for our country, and we're excited to have Byron with us tonight. And Byron he's going to be running for our Congress, and so we believe he will be our next congressman representing the state of Florida. And we love him. And what we love about him is he's a man after God's own heart. He's like David. He has a heart for the Lord. And in his last re-election, or the elections that we just had, there were so many negative things that they tried to bring out about Byron. But one thing we all knew, that he was a man of integrity and that he loved God. And that's why he won his election. And he's got the heart of the Lord. And so we're blessed to have you with us, Byron and Erica. Glad you guys are here. Amen. Why don't you greet everybody, Byron? Just share with everybody.
Well, first of all, it's really a pleasure to be here with you guys. Frankly, to be on the stage with you, Pastor, you, Father Frank, and Dr. King, you joining us by Zoom. I got to tell you, it's humbling for me just to be here. It was a long campaign, but you know what? I think, anytime you go into something that's incredibly difficult, the first thing you got to do is make sure you have the full armor on. That's number one. Then number two, the second thing you do is you just stay prayed up, you stay focused, and you just accomplish the goal that's in front of you every single day. You try not to get caught up in the horizon. You try to get focused on the step that the Lord has for you that day. And so throughout the entire campaign, that's really what we did. And, sometimes my staff would look at me and they would say, aren't you upset about this, or aren't you worried about this? And I just try to be a calm man in the boat. That's what I always say, like, we're just going to be a calm man in the boat. That's all we're going to do. And so, getting through the campaign was really a tremendous victory, but it was really humbling, because when you put yourself out there, faults and all, warts and all, and people can see through that and still decide to choose you to be their representative, or actually be the Republican nominee to go on to be their representative. I want to be respectful of my Democrat opponent, even though we'll go ahead and take care of that in about 60 days. But I want to be respectful. But, when you go through this, number one, it shows you the depth and the strength, not just of you and who God created you to be, but it shows you the depth and the strength of his power and the way he moves, he clears out the path for you. So it's really just a blessing to be here and to be with all of you this evening. Thanks for having me here. Dr. King, I got a question for you. In this new book, in your mind, what does one race look like? Explain that to us.
Absolutely. I've had challenges with this much of my life. However, I was born into a Christian family with 3 Baptist preachers. My granddaddy, Martin Luther King Sr., my daddy, Reverend A.D. King, and my uncle, my famous uncle, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So that was one scripture that they would often teach. of one blood. God made all people to live together on the face of the earth. And that's Acts 17:26. And it goes on to 27 and 28, saying that God appoints and places us where God desires. And so we are one blood and one race. And that's why it was easy for my uncle, for example, to say we must learn to live together as brothers, and I'll add as sisters, or perish together as fools. He didn't say cousins, neighbors, any of that, but brothers. And so you can't be brothers and sisters if you're different races. So we're one blood and one race. And I would say to people often, please try not to say your race needs to get along with my race, unless you're an Endorian or a Klingon or something like that. And so I said, we are one human race. And I've been doing that for many years. And more recently, other people are getting it, especially young people, they'll get it. They'll say we're one race. And then we're not colorblind. We can see color. For example, you see my dress is blue and you see colors all around me, but then you look at my face, oh, I don't see color. I don't know what color you are. I don't see color. We see color. We celebrate ethnicity. Color denotes ethnicity, not race. And so Ginger and I, understanding this, speaking from our own experiences, and we tackle some of the very tough topics as well. But science, well, let's put it first. God says that we're one race, one blood. And then science agrees. And many philosophers understand that. So for us to keep dividing over social justice and a social gospel that sees our skin color making us different races. And social justice is man-made. God's justice has righteousness and judgment, but it's overcome by mercy. Justice comes from mercy there in that. And so if we can see each other as one race and take that out of our thoughts that we're separate races, then we will stop dividing. So we need to repent to God. God, we didn't listen to your word. We didn't believe you that we were one race. We were going to be separate races anyway. We're sorry. And that will help us.
You know, 25 years ago, my wife and I started an orphanage in Haiti. So we have about 55 children there in Haiti. When we first started the orphanage, we couldn't speak any Creole. We didn't know anything about the culture. We went on a mission trip there, and God began to stir our hearts, and we got together with some other pastors and said, let's do something. So my son was little. Jordan was probably, 6 or 7 years old? He's just a little guy. And we went to this village we'd never been to, and we're like, how are we going to, we can't communicate with them, so we really don't know how to speak the language. What will we do? So we get there, and my son kind of drifted off while we're all talking, figuring out what we were going to do. And there are 4 or 5 little Haitian children there. And Jordan and my son and the Haitian children are all in the dirt playing, making roads with little cars. They couldn't speak each other's language, but the love and they could communicate with each other because we're one race. They just
one human race. And you have little children, especially because I've been around to Africa and Europe, many, many places. And sometimes little children, if they see people with skin that's a different color, they'll rub it and try to fix it and stuff. Yeah. But they still see each other as people.
Amen.
They just do.
Yeah, that's what touched us. Is like we're trying to figure all this out, and the kids are like, "You don't have to. God made us, and we are one, and we can just be one." Yeah. And that was so life-changing for us. Now, I grew up in church. My dad, my mom and dad raised me in church my whole life. At about 17, I figured I knew more than everybody, so I was going to go figure out life, And I ventured out into the world and got myself in all kinds of trouble. But raised in church. Like what does that look like for you both? Tell me about your faith journey. You grew up in a household of faith, obviously with your father and all that he was doing to represent the world and bringing some healing. But for you yourself, tell us about your faith journeys, how you come to faith, and when did it become real for you?
I was born on January 22nd, 1951, and we know several years later, Roe v. Wade passed on my birthday, and I had no idea that I had been formed in the womb to become what I am now, but God knew. So I'm born into a Christian family, but I did not receive Jesus as my Lord and Savior until 1983. So between those years, I knew scriptures, went to church, knew the right songs, and all of that. I was born into the civil rights movement at the time. But even as a little girl, before I became born again, I used to love and enjoy reading certain scriptures in the Psalms. Ecclesiastes was my favorite book in the Old Testament for a long, long time. And I still love Ecclesiastes. A time for war, a time for peace, a time for love, and all of that. And I would write poems out of the scripture, but I had not yet accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. I was rescued from abortion. My mother wanted to have a D&C, not a back alley abortion, because abortion was illegal, but she wanted a D&C because she wanted to finish school. And my grandfather convinced her. He said, I saw that baby in a dream 3 years ago. She's a little girl with bright red hair. She's going to bless many people. And so I was prophetically born, grew up in a Christian family. I was pro-choice, actually. I had secret abortions and a miscarriage that was related to all that, and became born again in 1983. And from that time on, and it took a few years moving forward, I became fully pro-life over a period of time and began to agree to serve the Lord. Now, right before that, I've been a screen actress, a stage actress, singer-songwriter, and I still am some of those things. I still do some of those things today. I was elected to office twice as a state legislator, passed legislation, and then in 1983, I became born again and accepted Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I remember over a period of time, I said, if they slay me, yet will I put my trust in you. And for many days I would wake up. The answer to you, Lord, is yes. The answer to you, Satan, is no. Yeah. Good morning, Holy Spirit. And I do that quite often still today.
Amen. Father Frank, how about you?
Well, I grew up in a Catholic family, and, we went to church on Sundays, but I wasn't very much involved in the church beyond that, except that, and I went to public schools, and I was very much into my studies. I like to just I spent time with friends, but I spent more time in the library with my books. So it was mathematics and my love for mathematics that led me to the priesthood. And the way that happened was, if you study math deeply, the more you go into it, the more abstract it becomes. And so, for example, you start dealing with the concept of infinity. Well, the concept of infinity is not that far from the concept of eternity. Thinking mathematically led me to start thinking philosophically and looking at the laws and the rules of mathematics and how much sense they make made me start thinking, well, there's got to be an intelligence behind these laws. Got me to pray more, read the scriptures. I was a senior in high school, in public school, and I started reading the scriptures more, praying more, going to church every single morning before going to school. And, the ladies that were there for daily mass every day, they'd say, are you thinking of becoming a priest? I said, well, no, I honestly had not thought about it. But I said, maybe I should think about that. But here's the one thing that came through so crystal clear. Jesus Christ is Lord. He's real. His word is living and active. And as I delved into that and experienced the power of that, I thought to myself, what better could I do for people than to help them find this joy as well, to help them find this meaning in life. And as I progressed, right after high school, I decided I was going into seminary. I went into seminary and started preparing for ministry. And one of the greatest joys throughout my preparation for ministry, my work as a priest in a Catholic parish, and then after doing that for 4 years or so, being drawn into this pro-life movement full-time, here's what has always been one of my greatest joys. That there are differences in the body of Christ. There are different denominations, we all realize that. But far more important and far more powerful is the fact that all of us, no matter where in the body of Christ we might be, we stand up in front of this world and we proclaim, Jesus Christ is Lord. He is God made man. He died for our sins. He rose from the dead. He conquered death for all of us, and he is coming back. And we can stand, and we do stand united in that. And because we're united in that, because Jesus Christ is Lord, then you know what? Nobody else is. The government isn't. The court isn't. The Supreme Court is not supreme. The court of Jesus Christ is supreme. Nobody owns another person, and that's why slavery's wrong, and that's why abortion's wrong. We stand up and we proclaim him, and in proclaiming him, then we can serve human beings in his name. And that's been my greatest joy.
Amen. I think he's got some Pentecost in him, don't he?
He does.
Yeah.
Look, if you noticed, as he was going through his explanation of his journey to faith, he was inching more and more out of that seat. Like he's ready to just get up. I was going to go sit down.
Me too, buddy. Me too.
That's what I was going to do. I mean, listening to your journey, Dr. King, listening to your journey, you know, my journey to the Lord was different. I mean, I was 20 years old. I was lost. I mean, I was literally at rock bottom at 20 years old, really searching. And actually, you know, the way the Lord always does, he sent somebody into my path. It was actually my wife, Erica, who's sitting here with us this evening. And I'm searching, and she goes to me one day. She goes, you know, why don't you just come to church with me? And I said, okay. And so I'm sitting in Abundant Life Fellowship, Tallahassee, Florida, and I'm in the back. This is typically where all the new people go. We sit in the back, you know, back right corner. And, you know, the pastor is preaching. And I swear he talked to my mother, like, earlier that day, because everything in his message is, like, directed, like, right at me. And, you know, I was going to church, you know, off and on. And during that time, I'm still in college in Tallahassee, and I was a waiter at Cracker Barrel. How many of y'all love Cracker Barrel? You know, y'all love it? I loved working at Cracker Barrel, except when you guys would ask me for biscuits. Because if you don't bring somebody their biscuits, you know, it's a problem. They get upset, you know. So I remember I was waiting on one table. It was a husband and wife. They had been traveling. And I come out, and, you know, she looks up, and she sees my name on my apron, and she goes, "You're Byron." I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she goes, "You know, I was driving with my husband. I was writing a story, and the Lord put it on my heart to write a story about this guy named Byron, and he's, you know, he's running from the Lord, but the Lord is going to catch him." And she was like, "And so this story's for you. I knew I wrote something. I wrote it about you." So she hands it to me, and I was like, "Okay, all right, thanks, lady." You know, I brought her pancakes and whatever else she wanted. Made sure I brought her biscuits because she definitely wanted those. And a couple weeks went by. He's still going to church off and on. But the Lord's been dealing with me, you know. And my table one day, it was actually September 2nd, 2001. My table was a group coming back from a revival. 12 people in the group. One black pastor and 11 black ladies. And they were just having a great time. They were laughing. That was my only table. So typically, if you're waiting on a big table, once you're done bringing them the food and you bring them the check and some extra drinks, they kind of just sit there and talk for a while. So I'm on the server line, and I'm rolling silverware. And, you know, when you're on the server line, everybody's running back and forth. Cooks are yelling, "I need this. Come pick this up." I'm rolling silverware. A couple of the other waiters that worked with me that day, they came up to me. They go, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine. I'm good." And I'm just rolling silverware. And the Lord spoke to me. He said, "You need to stop running from me." Just like that. I mean, you know, the Lord is a gentleman. So he doesn't say, "Hey, get up and go do this." He just says, "You need to stop running from me." And so I'm like, and I just keep rolling silverware. And he goes, "Go outside and go catch that lady. Go catch him." So I just start walking out, and my manager looks at me. He's like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "Man, move. I got to go talk to my table." So they're getting on their bus. They're getting ready to leave. And the last lady's getting on the bus, and I walked up behind her, and I tapped her on the shoulder. She turns around. She looks at me. She goes, "Baby, can I help you?" And I just looked at her, and I said, "Man, the Lord just told me to stop running." And all 12 of them pour off that van. And I gave my life to Christ right there in the parking lot of Cracker Barrel, Tallahassee, Florida. And so I always get emotional when I tell that story. There's a tree that was like in that parking lot. So my wife and I, we went with our kids back to Tallahassee, I think maybe 10 years, 12 years later. And I took them by that tree. And every time I spent the last 4 years in Tallahassee being in the legislature, and every now and again I always go back to that tree if I'm in Tallahassee, because it was really the start of life anew. I think when a life with Christ, that walk with Christ, it's a legacy unlike anything other. Thinking of legacies, Dr. King, you come from a phenomenal legacy, a legacy of true courage, of true love for this nation. Can you describe for us what is the legacy of your family, not just in America, but even in your family internally? What does that legacy look like?
Our legacy in the King family is faith, hope, love, and caring for others, and the least of these. I was raised by patriarchs, certainly matriarchs and women as well, but strong men in our family. We had an intact family structure with the father, the mother, the grandparents, and you knew everybody. That's very different today. And because of that, some other things are different as well. But I learned to honor and respect. I was taught to respect my parents, grandparents, and the whole family and all of that. So in that legacy, it was very difficult for me growing up. As a little girl, it was okay because I just really didn't understand. When my uncle, Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was killed, I wanted to hate somebody. So I remember my dad was there. He was on his way to get Aunt Coretta and then go to get Uncle ML's body. We called them ML-A-D King. And so I said, I hate white people, Daddy. I hate white people. They killed my uncle. And I remember my daddy put his arms around me. He began to rock me. And he said, white people live with us. White people pray with us. White people go to jail with us. White people die with us. White people didn't kill my brother. They didn't kill your uncle. You can't hate white people. The devil did that. So that was my first awareness of needing to forgive. And then my father was killed the next year. And I still was struggling with forgiveness and all of that. And I really didn't quite grasp it until I was born again in '83 there again. But I did marry. He walked me down the aisle a week before he was killed, actually. My dad did. And so I went through several years grappling with forgiveness and who to blame and all of this. And then after my abortions and all of that, I was a state legislator, actress, all that, born again in '83. And I realized that I was a sinner. And what my daddy was trying to teach me, my grandfather, my grandmother, Alberta King, was shot playing the organ at Ebenezer Baptist Church, playing the Lord's Prayer. So all of these things, and my grandfather, I remember we were at the Democratic Convention and President Carter was the nominee and he did his speech and everything. And Reverend Jesse Jackson was there. And I remember my grandfather had been very hurt and he felt that people in the in the civil rights movement should have protected my uncle. And so Jesse Jackson was there and Jesse wanted to speak to my grandfather. And he says, no, they killed my sons. Put an S on it. They could have helped. They didn't. I said, but Granddaddy, didn't you say that we have to love and forgive everybody? And I remember Granddaddy's answer. He says, yeah, he looked at me. My Aunt Christine was there looking out the window. He says, bring him in. Jesse Jackson sat in my grandfather's lap. Granddaddy was in a wheelchair and cried like a baby. And Granddaddy put his arms around her. I forgive you, son. I forgive you, son. So learning forgiveness, my mother, Naomi, who's still living, she says, baby, we have to heal on our feet. So you have to love, forgive, you have to repent, you have to forgive others. God forgives us. We have to be nonviolent. It is all back to one human race, brothers and sisters. So our legacy is faith, hope, and love. We believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, still do. Not social gospel, not social justice. There is a Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent Social Change. But I would tell them, I'm on the board, I tell them all the time now, we can look at social this and social that, but we need Jesus. We need to return to the Lord. So the legacy of those Baptist preachers, and I guess they never knew I'd become ordained and a Christian evangelist, and I am that today. So it's been a wonderful walk with Jesus. being raised by men and women who love the Lord.
Amen. Well, thank you so much. I love you. What a great, great testimony in the King family and all that you've done and continue to do. And we're so grateful and blessed. How did you come to the pro-life movement? How did you get involved in the pro-life movement? And what does that mean for both of you? Because both of you are leading the way to say we've got to end this murder. We've got to end this, we've got to do something. And I think that's, for me as a pastor, I've always, when I was a kid, they sold this to me and told me, abortion is good because if a young girl gets raped and doesn't want to have the baby, well, she should be able to not have that baby, or incest, or they sold it to us like that. But that's not what's going on today. It's an onslaught of murder, and I just like, how did you guys come to that place where you said, oh, wait, we got to do something? Because that's where I feel like I am as a pastor of a small church here in Naples, Florida. I feel like the Lord has said, you've been silent too long. And you need to get active. And that's when Rick came to me and said, I really want to do this. I'm like, I feel like the Holy Spirit is telling me that all the churches need to speak up and stop acting like we're against it and saying nothing about it. And so that's what I feel like God's saying to me. How did you guys get involved?
In 1983, I was pro-choice. And I became born again. The young lady took me to the Bible, Romans 10:9, and she answered every question I had, and I confessed my sins. And I had been put on a good religious front, going to church and all that, knew just when to say amen and all that. But I had not really reconciled to the cross of Jesus Christ, the blood of Jesus. So when I became born again, I had to confess all of my sins, even though I had been kind of coerced and lied to by Planned Parenthood and fooled and tricked. I got all of that. But I said, God, regardless of whose fault it was or what happened or why I aborted these babies, that's still a sin. And as I began to confess my faults to Jesus, several things happened. So in 1983, I was a college professor. And my students, I was teaching business law, and I said, morals and ethics today, has America gone too far? A woman has the right to choose what she does with her body. The baby's not her body. Where's the lawyer for the baby? And then I added from Martin Luther King Jr., how can the dream survive if we murder the children? So I personally became pro-life in 1983 because I had the other arguments. Suppose you're raped, suppose this, suppose that. And even poverty. The woman's too poor. Well, Jesus fed the poor. Jesus didn't kill the poor. And so I kept going, if someone is raped, that's a terrible injury. That's a harm. But another injury to the woman's own body, because abortion is bad for a woman's body, her spirit, soul, and body. And then it takes the civil rights of a baby. That's why I'm executive director of Civil Rights for the Unborn today. So I had all of those issues. Rape is wrong, but abortion won't cure the rape. It just won't. So when we looked at all of the reasons, I became born again and pro-life in 1983. And I'm personally and publicly pro-life.
And I had never really thought much about abortion until that period of time as a senior in high school that I was referring to earlier, when I began getting more involved in the church. And that January was the January of 1976. Roe v. Wade had just been handed down 3 years before that. My mom told me there was a bus going from our town to D.C. for the March for Life. Would I want to go? This was the 3rd annual March for Life. So I said, yeah, I'll come. And that day opened my eyes to this whole issue and to this movement, because it was such a big crowd, so enthusiastic, so diverse. We saw people there from every ethnic background, different political backgrounds, all different ages, all different religions. And I said, this is something big. And I started paying more attention to abortion after that, and got involved in the pro-life movement in various ways. And then after serving for a few years in a church in New York City, I felt a calling within a call. I came to the moment when I was convinced that I needed to give all my time, all my energy, all my ministry to saving the unborn and ending abortion. And then, that was in 1993, I went to my bishop at that time was Cardinal John O'Connor of New York, and I asked his permission. Now, he also was a champion for the unborn, so I had the right boss at the right time, you know. So he said, yes, you can do this work full time. And I've been doing it full time ever since. And a lot of people feel like, they say to me, oh, you know, Father Frank, you deal full time with abortion. You know, they say two things. Number one, it's, that's a difficult issue. Boy, and they sort of like talk as if almost like they're sorry for me. Like, oh, what a burden you have to bear. You know, it's a difficult issue, you know. And I look at them and say, I got the easiest job in the world. I said, if I were to ever have imagined that all my work, all my effort, all my energy, all my challenges would revolve around 4 words, convincing people of 4 words, this is the most easy thing in the world. You don't kill babies. I mean, there's a lot of issues way more complicated than that, right? You don't kill babies. That summarizes the whole message. So they say, oh, Father, this is so difficult. No, it's not difficult. And the second thing is, you know, oh, you know, you deal with abortion all the time. That must be depressing. How do you deal with this morning, noon, and night, 7 days a week, every day of the year? I say, you know what? It would be depressing, except for the fact that I'm proclaiming the victory of life. That I'm proclaiming, along with St. Paul, that in Jesus Christ, death has been abolished. He is risen. Death no longer has power over him, and therefore it no longer has power over us who are in him. He who believes in me will never die. And so, yes, we die, but now we die in Christ. So we have the victory. We start with victory. We're not just working for victory. We're working from victory. Victory time. We wouldn't be sitting here. Right? This wouldn't be Destiny Church. You wouldn't be a pastor, neither would I. We wouldn't have a church. We wouldn't be a church if there weren't already a victory won over death. So this makes it a joyful work, and this means, you know what? We don't scratch our heads wondering, gee, you know, can we overcome the power of abortion? Can we end the culture of death? Can we stop Planned Parenthood? We don't sit back wondering whether we can do it or how or when we will do it. We stand before the powers of death and of hell and of Planned Parenthood and of abortion, and we say, you have already been defeated. We stand before you in the name of Christ, and we say you will no longer menace the human family. So it's a joyful work. It really is.
You know, I got to tell you, serving in the legislature for 4 years, you get an opportunity to vote on these matters. And the meetings with activists from Planned Parenthood are always quite interesting. They get heated in my office sometimes because, listen, being a black man, a black representative, they try to come at me a little bit harder than they probably do some of my other colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle. But it's always interesting. But I always kind of ask them with this one question I always ask them. If a woman who is pregnant, 1 month pregnant, is shot and killed, is it a homicide or a double homicide? Like, this is the question. You see, because when you're a legislator, it's about law. It's about what is going to be the law that governs your city, your state, or your nation. Well, under our laws, if a pregnant female is killed by a perpetrator, the perpetrator is charged with double homicide. That is the charge that comes down. And so when you look at the issue of life, it's really also a matter of law. Are we going to be consistent with the application of law no matter what? I think oftentimes in our politics, and we kind of see it today, and I was going to try not to bring up Joe Biden, but I'll bring him up a little bit. If you listen to Joe Biden or the DNC in their convention, they were trying to be the army of light and the candidate of empathy. And I've been talking with voters about this the last several weeks. If you're a candidate or an elected official of empathy, what that actually means is you are emotionally investing in a segment of the population to the detriment of other parts of the population. You see, elected officials, although we are empathetic, although we have compassion, when it comes to law, we have to be consistent because the law has to equally apply to all people. So, roll that back to when it comes to being pro-life. The reason why being pro-life for me, other than my faith, is actually very easy as an elected official is because the law has to be consistently applied. If I'm going to tell a perpetrator that if you shot and killed a woman who was pregnant, that's double homicide, then how can I then in the same breath vote to say it is okay for the mother to take the life of the child? How can I do both? Now I'm not being consistent. And I think if you look at the history of law, if you really study law, what you understand is that it is elected officials who are not consistent with the application of law. They're the same elected officials that actually cause dislocation in our society or in any society amongst people. And that is the thing that actually upsets and creates issues amongst people living in any society, whether that's America or any other society. And so I think as we're talking about that, Dr. King, here's my question for you. You served in a legislature. I've served in a legislature. With everything that's going on in media, the divisions we have in government, frankly, as toxic as our politics have become, for you, what are the elements or the principles that you look for in elected officials before you decide to vote for them, to choose them, to vote for them, to support them, or whatever the case might be?
I really urge people to do what many of us probably do when we first wake up, is to pray. Now, some people wake up and turn on Fox or CNN or whatever. I'm a Fox News contributor, a Newsmax contributor. I do support.
There goes. It came back on.
We're coming back.
They'll get her back on. But how do we do that? How do we? What are the issues that we look for when we're choosing who should we support?
This is such an important question, especially right now when our nation is actually, the voting season has begun. We no longer have just election day. We've got 2 months of voting. Yesterday, North Carolina was the first state to begin sending out the absentee ballots. So we're in voting season right now. And there's about 100,000 races that are going to be decided in America for elections 2020. 100,000 races. From the presidency right down to the local school council and mayors and so forth. Okay, so, one of the first questions I ask is, of candidates, do they love their country? Because if they don't love their country, how can they lead it? If they don't believe in the values of America, how can they serve in public office? They're not going to be serving. They're going to have some other agenda. So where's the love of country? Is there evidence of patriotism? Are they of one mind? If they're going to serve in this government at any level, are they of one mind with the founders who established it? Do they even know? And this sounds like a silly question because, after all, if someone is coming to you and me and saying, vote for me, you're going to presume that this is the case, but don't presume it anymore. Do they even know the kind of government that has been entrusted to them and to us? Because some of them don't. They don't know it, and they don't love it. So we look at the structure of government, and you've got to ask candidates, well, you can put the question this way. You want me to vote for you. Okay, again, no matter what race it might be. If I vote for you, sir, ma'am, if I vote for you, tell me, what kind of power do you think I'm giving you? Important question. They've got to answer that question. What do they think we are doing to them when we vote for them? If they win, what do they think they have won? Now, whether it's a member of Congress, whether it's a governor, whether it's the president, whether it's a judge, they're going to swear an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States. Do they believe in the Constitution? What do they believe about the Constitution? Do they believe they can rewrite it? Because if you're going to swear an oath to uphold the Constitution, and meanwhile you think you have the right to rewrite it, you're not swearing an oath to anybody but yourself, right? So what do they think the limits and the nature of their authority are? Do they have, and here's a key part of that question, do they have a veto power over human rights? Or are they, as elected officials, in the business of protecting human rights? Again, are you of one mind with the founders? The founders said, our rights are given to us by our Creator. And they began to say clearly what those rights are, and they started with life. Life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and many other rights. We have the Bill of Rights and so forth. Well, where do they think these rights came from? The founders made it clear what they thought. Come from God. Government is instituted to secure these rights. So any candidate at any time in our history for any level of government, you ask him or her that question. What do you think we're doing when we vote for you? We are not giving you a veto power over human rights. We are not giving you a veto power over our freedom. We are not giving that to you. We couldn't give it to you if we wanted to. That's what it means that the rights are inalienable. You can't take them away, and we can't give them away. We can't throw them away. So it starts there. It really does. Because if any elected official believes that they have a veto power over human life, well, then they believe in a different type of government. And a good name for that kind of government is tyranny. And that's exactly what our founders came over here to escape. So, and it starts there, and then, of course, you go into the other issues, and we can talk more about that as we go along tonight.
Welcome back, Dr. Avita. Sorry about that. All the power went off here, so we lost power for a second, but we got you back. And were you able to hear Father Frank's response?
I just heard his response. Did you hear what I was saying about social media and all that?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So I didn't know. It did go out. I wanted to make sure, and I definitely agree with Father Frank as far as tyranny is concerned, and this Marxist, socialist, all of that. And we have to exercise our own rights. And people, Christians will say, oh, I'm not going to register to vote. That's just of the world. Well, Joseph and Mary were going to pay their taxes and answer the census when Jesus was in Mary's womb. And Jesus said, give unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and to God what belongs to God. And so we have an obligation, a responsibility, and a privilege. It's a privilege because, as Father Frank says, in some other countries, people don't even have a right and don't have a say. And it was a shocking thing to discover that there are many Christians who are not registered to vote. Please register and vote, because I was taught, as a matter of fact, I came up in the civil rights movement, and we were fighting for the right to vote. And people fought and died for that right and that privilege. And I was told also, if you don't have time to vote and you're not interested in voting, don't complain. You didn't want to say, and you didn't exercise your right to say. So we do have an obligation, and evangelicals, Christians, people of faith should vote. And we should not vote because of personality. I'm not going to vote for President Trump because I don't like what he says. I'm going to vote for Joe Biden because he has a nice smile. Well, he smiles on his way to making sure that more babies are aborted, you see? And so we can't vote for personalities.
Yeah.
We have to vote for God's word and follow God's word, and those principles and votes should be aligned with that.
Amen.
Oh, there we go. One quick thing.
Yeah.
I think this is important. Like I said, being in politics, being an elected official, the largest political organization in the world, not just the United States, in the world, is not Republicans, it's not Democrats, it's not the labor union, it's not the Likud party in Israel, it is the church. The church is the largest political body on the face of the planet. we make an assumption that politics is for political parties. No, no, no. Politics is how we organize our lives. Politics is the system upon which human beings can figure out the things that we can't do for ourselves. So if the church doesn't engage and use its political power, then it is left to political parties and to elected officials and to activist groups and to people who have a political design or actually have an agenda that they want to promote, and they use politics as the pathway to move their agenda. So to, you know, your friends who come to Destiny Church or to any other church, you got to tell them it's not, I'm so sorry, Lord, what I'm about to say. It's not good enough to pray. Because faith without works is dead.
Come on.
It's dead.
Actually, never
Faith
mind.
without works is dead. That's true.
Amen.
Faith without works is dead. So you have a responsibility to pray, but you also have a responsibility to use the very right you have in the largest political party, frankly, on the face of the earth, and that is the church.
Well, James Robertson was interviewing Jensen Franklin, and I love Jensen. I love listening to him preach, and I love James Robertson. Well, James was interviewing Jensen, and they were talking about, you know, voting and all of that, and talking about some experiences with President Trump, inviting them to pray. When they finished that little interview segment, Jensen Franklin said, there are, I think he said 26 million unregistered evangelical Christians, 26 million that haven't even registered to vote yet.
That's right. That is true.
How do we do it? How do we get the message? I mean, this is one way for us to talk about it here, but how do we get evangelical Christians to check? You know, we were sitting in our office, and Jason is my associate pastor, and he and I were sitting in the office with our administrative girl, Stephanie. Your offices have talked to Stephanie. So we're all sitting around the table there, and I made this statement: how do people know if they're actually registered to vote? Stephanie said, it's so easy. You just type in your name and type in vote, and it'll show you if you're registered to vote. And I said, well, put my name in. Just put my name in and see if I'm registered. So she types in Greg Ball, vote. And it comes up registered, where I live, and all that. And I said, are you registered? Stephanie said, yeah, I'm registered. She typed in her name, vote. I said, are you registered? To Pastor Jason. He said, yes, I'm registered. I voted last year. I vote all the time. I said, put in Pastor Jason's name. She typed in his name, vote, and it said not registered.
Whoa.
I'm like, every Christian needs to go online now and check. And he got on it right away and said, I'm making sure that my vote's going to count. And I think every Christian needs to check and say, you know what, I want to make sure that I'm registered to vote. Am I correct? I mean,
because of voter fraud, they're doing all kinds of things. And prolifevote.org can give you a lot of information to some of the same things you're just saying. Father Frank, are you still there?
I'm here.
Father, okay, because you could tell them how they can find exactly those startling numbers, finding out where you're registered, if you're registered, how you can get your absentee ballots, where you should go, when the primaries are, when's the last day of registration. That information is available. It is absolutely available. Father Frank, you could give a few more details on that.
Yeah, so, well, I was going to start exactly with what you just said, Pastor Greg. You know, we set up a simple domain, checkyourvoterregistration.com, and that goes to one of the several places you can go, as you were just mentioning. There's a simple website that the National Association of Secretaries of State put up. And again, you do the same thing. Put your name, address, you know, and it'll show you either your voter registration's up to date and ready, or it's not. And if it's not, you know, you fix it while you still have time to do so. So that is a key. That is a key. And, you know, in terms of overcoming the obstacles for churches, pastors, Christians to get involved in the voting process, one of the things I've always helped pastors to do is to look at it not as so much a political activity, but to look at it as a pastoral activity to get your congregation registered to vote. Why is it a pastoral activity? Why is it a gospel activity? Because you're equipping the people of God to make the change in the world that the Lord Jesus wants us to make. He doesn't put us in the world in order to run away in a corner and let somebody else decide what kind of laws are going to govern us or court decisions are going to be handed down. He puts us in the world to do what he said at the end of Matthew's gospel before ascending into heaven. Go into the world, make disciples of every nation, teach them to carry out everything I have commanded you. He wants us to make a change. Paul says in his letter to the Romans that civil authorities are ministers of God. It's not just us in the clergy who are ministers of God. It's the members of Congress. It's the members of the state legislatures. It's Byron and his associates. By the way, I wish I could come move here so I could vote for you. But I'll be... Yeah, that's right. but no, listen, we need men like this in the legislature because they understand this. You serve. It's service. You serve in the legislature. You serve. And that means you realize that the people you're serving, you work for them. It's not the other way around. And you're serving them because God, as we were saying before, God gave them their rights, and you're there to help secure those rights, which then translates into one other thing. It's not just what's in the mind and heart of the legislator. What's in the mind and heart of the voter? If the pastors can help the congregation to see the following: voting is actually an act of love of God and neighbor.
Wow, amen.
Because in love of God, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar. The Lord wants us to be faithful citizens. We are citizens of his kingdom.
Yes.
But we're also citizens of this nation. He wants us to be active and faithful citizens. We're actually serving him. We're honoring what Paul's told the Romans are structures of authority that have been established by God. That's got love of God. Love of neighbor. I often point out to people, President Trump now has put 230 federal judges on our courts. The district courts, the appellate courts, the two on the Supreme Court. Do you realize that 40 years from now, your great-grandchildren are going to be reading about court decisions that were handed down by Trump-appointed judges? Amen. 40 years from now. And like Alvita said, and some people say, oh, I don't like what he said yesterday. Or I don't like what he said 20 years ago. How about what his judges are going to say 20 years from now? Or 40 years from now. So when I say love, voting is an act of love of neighbor, because you are helping to secure the rights of your neighbors and their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren all across this country. By voting for the right people, we're actually serving and loving our neighbor. And unless we start seeing this in a spiritual context, people are going to be, because a lot of these people, they're not registered, or their pastors are not urging them to be registered because they say, oh, well, I'm not involved in politics. Well, are you involved in the gospel? Are you involved in the Great Commission? Are you involved in helping people love God and love their neighbor? So I think we got to frame it that way.
Amen. That is so good. Did you enjoy this? Amen. I want to thank Dr. Avita King. Thank you so much for joining us via Zoom. Can we just give her a great big shout of love? God bless you. And Byron, we're so blessed to have you with us. Thank you so much. And Father Frank, what a wonderful time. We're not dismissed yet, but we're going to dismiss our guests for a few minutes. I'm going to have Elder Randy come share with us a little bit about the tables in the foyer and what's going on out there and how you can register. And we love you so much. Elder Randy, come.
Wow. You know what? This is kind of like throwing red meat to a rabid dog in front of me. Whoa. I'm registered. I know that because I do registrations, but I'm ready to go again. Bring those cards up here. Let's go. All right. Hey, thank you very much. I'm not a mother. I don't have two hands. Go ahead and put it up. I want to thank you again, Rick and Chris, very much for what you've done to put this together. I remember when we were sitting back in that room and you made the comment. I didn't know how it was going to work, but I'm glad it did. And thank you guys for all your hard work that you've done. Could I get the ushers to bring forward some cards? I think if you will. Yeah, we've got some, if you need pens, the pens will be brought forward. And you all got a card here. If you would like to fill that out, you don't have to, but if you would like to, we'd like for you to, and drop it in as you leave into the offering basket. That would be a wonderful thing for us. It'd be a wonderful thing for Father Frank. I'm looking forward to hearing him get Pentecostal a little longer. I was sitting there just before that happened, and I leaned over to my wife and said, I think he's Pentecostal. And you said it, and he almost is. So, guys, I just want to share a couple of real quick things with you. One, we have a book table in the back, and I just grabbed this book right here. Alveda King, King Rules. It is 10 truths for you, your family, our nation to prosper. We have a book table. We're giving a suggested love offering for it. Just dig down and do the best you can. We also have Father Frank, and he asked me to kind of push this one maybe. He said it was his latest book, Abolishing Abortion. I may have to read that one. That is the biggest thing I would like to see happen in this country, if we could just get rid of abortion completely. You know, we need another Wilberforce that will come up and just absolutely stand firm until it happens. So, I want to tell you about the registration table, if I could. We have already registered 3 people tonight. Now, this is not a huge crowd, but every time that Donna and I and my team go out, we register voters. And we had the opportunity not too long ago to register 3 young people that were 18 years old, first-time voters, and they are voting pro-life and pro-Israel. Folks, I'm not going to take but 30 seconds because I know I'm not here for you to hear me. But I want to say this. This is the most important election we have ever had. This is a tipping point election. Now, I've been voting since 1972. None of them compare to what this one is like. We face a decision of tyranny or freedom, of death or life. We are a nation that was founded on Judeo-Christian values. And if we don't vote our biblical values, we are going to lose this country. And I'm not being, that's not hyperbole. That's not being dramatic. That is being absolutely truthful. We will lose this country. It is a spiritual battle that we are in. We are fighting a spiritual battle. So we need to get people registered. We need to get people out to vote. It is shameful, the number of people that do not vote that are in the churches across the country. Real quick, possibly as many as 80 to 90 evangelicals in the country. And that's not talking about other people of faith. But if you think about it, it's time we got out. It's time we got things done. It's time we voted. And it's time we changed this country and made sure that it stays the way it is. I want to introduce now. You've seen him, you've heard him. I'm looking forward to hearing the rest of it. Father Frank, come on up here, please. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. So, thanks for coming out tonight. This is really a pleasure to see you. I have become, just 3 years ago now, a fellow Floridian. Just 3 years ago, but we're over in Titusville, and Priests for Life was based in New York City for a very long time, and we had our central office. We got offices in various cities, but we had our central office on Staten Island. And but we outgrew it, and we said, we've either got to build a facility of our own or buy one someplace. And I had been since 1993. I've been traveling constantly. I go to several states a week, and people often ask me, well, with all the traveling you do, what state do you like the most? And I like every state. There's marvelous people of God in each and every single state and community of this nation. But I always said, I have a special love for Florida. So when it came time for us to find a new headquarters, we started looking around this Sunshine State, and we decided that in Titusville there was a facility that suited our needs just perfectly. So I'm really glad to be with you here tonight. And let's just expand a little bit more on some of these extremely important themes that we have been already reflecting on together with the help of our great beloved Alveda King. It has been said before, like Randy just said, it's been said a lot, that this is indeed the most important election our country has ever had. But we have to understand it's also one of the most different elections we've ever had. Different in this sense, that there were times when what was being decided in a national election was a choice between different ways of preserving the same nation, of different ways to get to the same goal, of different ways to deepen our fidelity and our ability to live out the creed of our founders and the principles on which they established this nation. And really, when you think about it, that's what politics is supposed to be in America. You agree, you're one nation, so you agree on certain principles, otherwise you're not one. But, you know, people have different ideas on how to get there, because it's not always clear how to reduce, what's the best plan for reducing crime in your community? I mean, what's the best way to welcome immigrants? We know that our country is a country of immigrants. We want to welcome them in. But what's the best way to do that? So people have different ideas, you know, about different ways. What's the best way to protect human life? That's the first purpose of government, protect the right to life. But we're not facing in this election anymore the choice between different ways to get to the same goal. We're choosing different goals. We're not talking about different ways to implement the same set of principles. We're choosing between two parties that however they got there, whatever happened in between, though there was a time when they did hold to the same principles, we've got to be honest and we've got to be clear. They do not have the same principles. And so it's a different kind of choice that we're making. And we have to help people understand that. This is literally a choice of what kind of America we want. And a lot of it we've articulated here already tonight. I mean, is this going to be a country? Let's talk about the first of all, what I said I look for in candidates first. I mean, do they believe in and love the country that they want to serve as elected officials? We just saw a Democrat convention of 4 days of trashing and criticizing and looking down on America. And President Trump said it very clearly in his acceptance speech the following week. He said, how can a group of people lead a country that they spend so much time criticizing? And then we saw a Republican convention with the theme of America, the great American story. America as a land of promise, a land of opportunity, a land of heroes, and a land of greatness. And instead of watching career politicians and Hollywood celebrities strut across the stage, we heard from ordinary Americans and loving moms and dads and in business owners and hardworking men and women and people of faith and people striving to live their faith. We're not talking about the same America here. We're not talking about the same principles as we discussed a little bit already. When we talk about the right to life, we're not just talking about one issue. See, some people, this is what they will do, right? They'll criticize us. Oh, well, you know, people in the pro-life movement, you're anti-abortion. It is more than one issue. You're not just, you can't just vote just on one issue. Well, first of all, we had Alveda here tonight. Ask Martin Luther King Jr. Whether he was motivated by one issue or not. Of course he was motivated by, ask William Wilberforce as well, over there against the slave trade in Parliament across the ocean. I mean, it's just natural that people get motivated to get into politics or into the public policy process in whatever way they are by a single issue. But that's not even the point, because it's not just a single issue. We have to help our fellow citizens understand this, that the right to life is the core of every issue. We care about unemployment. Well, why do we care about unemployment? Well, because people have the right to make a living. Well, why do they have a right to make a living? Well, because they have a right to live. We're concerned about poverty. We're concerned about people that don't have enough to eat or enough clothing or enough shelter. Well, why are we concerned about those things? Well, because they need food and clothing and shelter. Well, why do they need those things? Because they have to live. We're concerned about terrorism and plans to protect us from it. Well, why should we be concerned about that? Well, because people have to be protected from terrorism. Why they have to be protected from terrorism? Because they have a right to live. Every issue that is an issue because of the right to life. Otherwise, we don't have votes or debates about the temperature of the surface of Mars. We have votes and debates and laws and proposals about things that affect and impact human life. That's what makes it an issue to begin with. So if human life is disposable, if it doesn't have within itself an imperative to be respected and protected, well, then why does anything else matter? Why would crime be a problem? We're talking about two worldviews here, competing for our attention, competing for our loyalty, and competing for our votes. And they are completely incompatible. And we seem to have a whole segment of the population and a whole segment of government now crystallized into a major political party that can no longer tell the difference between the right to life and the right to kill. They can no longer tell the difference. This is a profound problem. Now, in the Catholic community, we had a leader up until not that long ago who was beloved around the world, appealed to Christians of every denomination, Pope John Paul II. Great servant of Christ, and he wrote a tremendous document called the Gospel of Life. I have a copy of it here, the Gospel of Life. And this came out in 1995. It's 25 years now since this was published. And in it, he makes some astonishing statements about what happens to a government when they legalize abortion, as our nation has done, and so many nations have done. In fact, most of the nations of the world, right? To one extent or another. You know what he says happens when you do that? Now you've created a situation where the nation, which should be a place where the weak and the strong alike find equal protection, becomes instead a place where the strong oppress the weak, where some are not equal to others, and some think they can take away the lives of others with the blessing of the law. He says the process by which you get to that point might look like the workings of democracy. Bills are debated, laws are passed, court decisions are issued. But he says if the end result of that is that some people can be killed by the choice of others, he said it's just a caricature of democracy. It looks like it came about the right way, but it's no longer democracy. And he said this is the death of true freedom. Because true freedom is possessed by a people only when their lives are secure. Then you're free to be who you're called to be. He says the death of true freedom. And then he says the state that does this, rather than becoming the common home where everyone is welcomed on the basis of equality, you know what he said? It becomes a tyrant state. And he said in that case, he said the disintegration of the state itself has begun. Now those are some powerful words. That doesn't sound like just one issue to me. When you're talking about the disintegration of the state itself, that's not just one issue. That's the foundation of every issue. Now, this is an argument that, how do you make this to people? They got to be willing to listen to some extent. But, there are people who are willing to listen. Some just want to vent. Some just want to disagree. Some don't even think. But for those who are thinking and really listening, these are some of the things that we need to point out. The other thing that goes along with this, and my friend and colleague, and I'm sure many of you know of him too, David Barton of Wall Builders, often points out, he says, I've always found among politicians and lawmakers that if you get it right on the right to life, you get it right on 90% of the other issues too. Because if the government can take away your life, they can take away your property. They can take away your freedom. Think of it again, two different worldviews, and each of them has an internal consistency. Either these rights are beyond your ability to touch or tamper with, or everything's negotiable. If life itself is negotiable, well, you don't believe in human rights anymore. And this is why we've got to stand up clearly to these politicians. Let's talk a little bit about the politicians who are pro-abortion. First of all, one thing you're going to notice about them, they never describe what they defend. Byron, I don't know if you've noticed this, as you said, in Planned Parenthood, people come into your office, and of course in D.C. you'll deal with this even more. Where these folks that they go around saying, it's a human right to have access to abortion, and they'll be so on fire for that. They're defending it with all the energy they've got and all the strategy they can muster and all the political force and all the money and all the media. But they forget to do one thing. They forget to describe what they defend. You ask anyone, take any level of government, take any of these, quote unquote pro-choice politicians, and get all the speeches together that they've ever given on the subject. Now let's look in the campaign now. If Biden addresses it or any of these other candidates, there are certain things they will never, ever, ever say. If you put all their speeches on abortion into a big document, all the speeches of any of them, and you do a word search, I guarantee you there's certain words that will never come up in that word search. Here's some of them. Arms, legs, skull, blood, forceps, decapitation, dismemberment. Now, you know where you will find those words? In the medical textbooks about how abortion is done. Arms and legs, because arms and legs are ripped off. Warren Hearn, who wrote the textbook called Abortion Practice, describes it as decapitation and dismemberment. There is no other way to describe it because that's exactly how these procedures are done. There's various different procedures at different points in pregnancy, but the fact of the matter is those who defend it never describe it. Now, if you don't describe what you're defending, that's a pretty good sign that you're wrong. If I stood out on the street corner, as I have done, and I'm sure some of you have done, you'd stand out on a street corner holding a sign showing an aborted baby. Now, let's say I went out and did that, and I wasn't dressed like that. I just put on a normal shirt, and I don't say anything, completely silent, and I don't hand out any flyers, and I don't have any words on my sign. Let's just say I'm going to stand there with a photo of a child who has been aborted. Missing an arm, missing a leg, covered with blood. What are people going to think I'm doing? Are they going to come to the conclusion that I'm standing there on the street corner to promote abortion or to oppose it? Right? Think about it. I'm not saying anything. I'm not dressed any different than they are, and there's no words on the sign. How do they know what I'm doing? Maybe I'm there selling it. Hey, folks, abortion clinic down the corner from here. Here's what you get. But you see, they're never going to conclude that I'm selling abortion, because if I were selling it, I would be a fool to show people what it is. And yet, what kind of product do you have, which if you're going to sell it, you're going to hide it? Again, a bell should go off in your mind. Something's wrong here. If you're going to sell something, you want to show it to people. You want to take some time to describe it. All you're going to do is describe it. You're going to describe its benefits. You're going to show it off. They do exactly the opposite. They want to hide what they defend. They don't want to describe what they defend. Something's very wrong with that. And this is what we've got to call them out on. Call them out. Call them out on their extremism. This is how we win, brothers and sisters, because you know what? The people of Florida, the people of America, have never believed in late-term abortion. They have never believed, there is no poll that exists that has ever shown a majority of the American people agreeing with the policy that we still have, that Roe v. Wade imposed on this country in 1973. There has never been a poll showing that the majority of the American people agree with this policy, which is abortion throughout pregnancy. Now, if you ask, you can look at polls and say, oh, do you agree with Roe v. Wade? Well, what kind of meaning would a poll like that have if the people don't know what Roe v. Wade says? There's been polls of polls, by the way. There's been analysis of polls that show that, with very, very few exceptions, when people are asked what they think about Roe v. Wade, they're told that Roe v. Wade allows abortion in the first 3 months of pregnancy. Well, it does, except that it also allows them in the second and the third trimesters too. Roe v. Wade itself actually permitted abortion throughout the entire pregnancy. Read the decision. It's right there in black and white. All throughout the pregnancy. My brothers and sisters, let me tell you, our fellow citizens do not realize this. And it's because they do not realize this that they can feel more comfortable voting for someone who says that they believe in Roe versus Wade. But we have got to take this opportunity now and expose, number one, what this Roe v. Wade really says, and number two, the extremism of the folks that they stand up and they say, oh, well, I'm pro-choice. Well, sir, ma'am, could you please tell me what that means? Are you in favor of having the choice of an abortion on a healthy baby carried by a healthy mother who is, let's say, 6 months along in the pregnancy? Or let's put it at 30 weeks, 33 weeks into the pregnancy. Healthy baby, healthy mother. Should she, don't talk to me, see, right away, let's say, oh, blah, blah, but that doesn't happen. But it does. Well, oh, that doesn't happen. But that's not what I'm asking you. Whether it happens or not, we'll deal with that in a moment. But you want to be a lawmaker, right? So you want to be president, right? You're going to decide what bills to sign, what bills to veto. You're going to appoint judges, right? Okay, so you got to answer this question for me. Should it be legal? You're a lawmaker. Should it be legal for her to be able to make a phone call and make an appointment for next week to have that child killed? 33 weeks into the pregnancy, she's healthy, baby's healthy. It's a simple yes or no. It really isn't complicated, guys. That's a big question, right? It does happen, brothers and sisters, if you go to exposeabortion.net, exposeabortion.net, you will be able to listen to telephone calls that we at Priests for Life made to abortion clinics. We had a young woman call and ask for an appointment, even though she was 33 weeks pregnant, and she was healthy and the baby was healthy. And what do you think they did? They gave her the appointment. This is happening, and it's legal. And those who are asking us to empower them, to elect them, to write the laws of this country, well, they better tell us what they think about that. And this is how we win on this issue. The extremism of the other side is absolutely mind-boggling. Here's another way you can ask the question. Sir, you're asking for my vote. Ma'am, you want me to elect you? Okay. Tell me just one circumstance in which you would say there should be a restriction on abortion. Just one. Under what circumstance should the law say, no, we can't allow it in that situation? Brothers and sisters, they won't be able to tell you one. The current Democrat Party has no limitation, exception, restriction, or limit. At all, they're not going to be able to tell you a single one. And there's another problem. Do you know that right now, in the House of Representatives, in fact, for the last 2 years, in this second session of, since the midterms, since the Democrats took over the House of Representatives. In the House of Representatives, there is a bill that would strengthen protection for babies who are born alive after a failed abortion. Now, does that happen? It happens. The state of Florida and other states as well have published statistics showing that it happens. The Centers for Disease Control has statistics in cases, and we know survivors as well. And we know moms of some of these babies that have not survived, and we know nurses who have been involved in the process and doctors. Listen, it happens. Sometimes, especially in these late-term procedures, sometimes the abortion fails to kill the baby. Okay, it happens. The question then is, well, then what is the doctor supposed to do? What is the doctor required to do under law? And when you really look at it carefully, although, of course, and the other side will always emphasize this, well, infanticide is already illegal. Well, let's not let them get away with a blanket statement like that. Let's probe a little deeper and say, well, exactly how illegal is it? Does it cover every circumstance? Does it protect every child in every circumstance like that? And the answer is no. The protection is fragmentary. There are gaps. There are loopholes. It's not consistent. It's not thorough. It's not complete. The law needs to be strengthened in this area. If they're going to stand up and say, as they do on the other side of the aisle, oh, well, infanticide is already illegal. Oh, well, then are you saying that that's how it should be? Sounds like you like that idea. If you like that idea, well, then why not make the law more consistent and stronger? What problem do you have with saying that, hey, in those instances where these babies are being left to die or they're not being given any medical attention or, God forgive us, they're even being smothered and killed, this is outside the womb. This is lying on a table. Shouldn't the law give them some protection? So that's what this bill says. It says it's not trying to make medical decisions. It's leaving that to the doctor. But what it's saying is get the baby to a doctor. Not the one that was just trying to kill him. Get them to a doctor at a nearby hospital. Get them to a doctor. So that if they can be saved, they can be saved. Because now they're born. We're not talking anymore about unborn children. That's what Roe v. Wade talked about, the unborn. Now we're talking about the born. We're talking about infanticide. So I'm telling you, there is a bill in the House of Representatives, but there hasn't been a vote on it. There has not been a vote on this bill because the Democrat leadership of the House and all but 3 of the 230 some odd Democrats in the House, all of them except 3, do not want a vote on this bill. To those of you that are listening here, to those of you that are listening online, let us not go through this election season and allow a member of the House of Representatives who is asking for re-election or someone who is asking to be elected to the House, let us not miss the opportunity to ask the candidates this question. Because we've got a whole lot of people across this country right now that are sitting in the House of Representatives right now, and they will not lift a finger or utter a word in favor of a law that will protect babies born alive. And then you ask the question, and then we let the voters decide. But to decide without knowing where they stand on this question is such a fundamental moral gap. It begins to raise the question that I always ask. If a politician can't respect the life of a little baby, how's he supposed to respect yours? How? How is that even conceivable? Like I said, my job is very easy. I go around saying you don't kill babies. It's nothing more simple than that. But it's amazing the darkness, right? The blindness. What's going on here? Now, here's the reality. We got 60 days until the election. There will be people you can persuade. And you know, the idea of asking these representatives this question, by the way, is not primarily to convert them. It's to inform the other voters. That's why you got to ask them publicly. If there's any opportunity to go to a town hall meeting and ask it publicly. If there's any opportunity to write them a letter, get a response, then you get a response from them on this. You know, listen, asking the question either on this infanticide issue or on the, by the way, if you want all the details on this, bornalive.us is a website we've set up to deal with this issue, bornalive.us. You'll see all the details there. But here it is, whether it's on that or it's on late-term abortion, listen, we have a win-win situation here in asking the question, just in asking the question. Because either they're going to say, well, yes, of course they should be protected, then we have support for the legislation we need to pass, or they're either not going to answer the question, they're going to waffle on it, or they're going to say no. Why is it a win-win situation? Because either we have support for the legislation that we need to pass, or that person has proven himself or herself unworthy of public office. And the voters won't miss this as long as you tell them the answer. This has got to be a public question. No one should be able to get away with winning an election if they can't address this point. Address it either way and then let the voters decide. But the point of you asking them is to influence the voters, not necessarily even to influence the candidate or the representatives. Then the other thing about that is, look, there's a lot of people among the voters, they'll be persuaded by that. They really will. Oh my gosh, I never realized that. But you know what? We don't have a lot of time. And so let's be smart in these next 2 months about how we use our time. What I mean is, go after the low-hanging fruit. Byron knows this in getting votes. You got to go for the low-hanging fruit. In other words, I could spend 3 hours trying to convince a pro-abortion friend to vote for the pro-life candidate, and, you know, I may invest that amount of time and not get anywhere, and they still end up voting for the pro-abortion candidate. Or I could spend those 3 hours contacting all my friends that I know are already pro-life, but maybe they're not registered, or maybe they don't know who the pro-life candidate is. And you know what? I could spend those 3 hours getting a whole lot more votes than just the one I'm trying to get, but I might not even get. Go for the low-hanging fruit. Think about, right now, tonight, start thinking about, if you haven't already, you may be already doing this, of course, but start thinking about who are the people I know in my, maybe they're in my church, in my prayer group, among my friends. I know that they are solid in these values. I know that they would be voting for the right person. The question right now is turnout. Are they going to vote? Are they even thinking about the election? We're thinking about it. We're very involved here. We're very committed. We're coming out here on a Saturday night to listen to these things. But a lot of our fellow citizens, they only just started paying attention to the election now. As the conventions happen, more attention is being brought to it. Then we're going to have the presidential debates. Although the first presidential debate doesn't start until September 29th. You know, by that time in 16 states, some 8 million people will have already voted. The voting has already begun. So this is crazy. I mean, the schedule is anachronistic. Back in 1980, 5% of people voted before Election Day. This year, it's going to be half or more. So early voting, I mean, early voting is, is a good thing if you do it the right way. Mailing ballots out to every registered voter is not the right way unless you want cats and dogs and dead people voting, or people forging. It's actually happening. I know somebody moved from California and said, hey, I'm still getting my ballot at my old address. He moved out of California 21 years ago. Any of you who manage databases, you know that it is a constant uphill climb, and you never reach the summit to keep that database up to date. Duplicates, bad addresses. I mean, we've got our database in our organization. We've got people full-time every single day trying to get rid of the duplicates and update the addresses. You never catch up. You never catch up because life is moving on for everybody. People are dying. People are moving. People, data is inaccurate. It's never 100%. Never. So you're just going to mail out the ballots to everybody on the whole list that you have of registered voters? That's insane. It's just insane. And the problem with that is not with the post office. They know how to handle a lot of mail. Every Christmas, they've got their biggest challenge, handling a lot of mail, and they do. The problem is not the post office, it's the states. The states are not equipped. When those ballots come back in, and God knows who filled them out when they got 3 ballots, for the one for themselves and 2 for the previous 2 occupants of that address. So hey, listen, this is addressed to Mary Smith. She used to live here. Let me fill out the ballot for Mary Smith for my favorite candidate. I could vote for them 2 or 3 times. You don't think people are going to do that? The people who don't understand what the problem is here, they're just not thinking. Or maybe they want to participate in that kind of a scam. This is absolutely a very serious problem. There are court battles going on. We need to make our voices heard that this system must not use this system. Absentee ballots, perfectly okay. Why? Because you're the one who's raising your hand saying, hey, I'm alive, and here's where I live, and I'm not a cat, and I'm not a dog. Give me my ballot. And you get it, and you identify yourself, and you make sure it goes back to the right place. But back to my main point here, though, is this. Let's go for the low-hanging fruit. Let's get to the people that we know are on our side already. And as we exercise our right to vote, let's be sure we're influencing countless other votes as well. Let's make sure that we're not just voting for the candidate of our choice, but working and volunteering for the campaign. Now's the time when all kinds of phone calls are being made, all kinds of doors are being knocked on, groups and organizations and campaigns and some pro-life organizations, we ourselves at Priests for Life, organizing and training people to do exactly these kinds of things. This time around, because of all the reasons we talked about tonight, is the time for us to be more involved in this than ever before. And that doesn't mean that you become, a political junkie, so to speak, or that you're changing your calling in life. Doesn't mean that at all. You have your gifts and your call. You do what it is that you're doing in life, your profession, your interests, your hobbies. None of that has to change. All this is saying that these next 2 months we have an unprecedented opportunity and duty to protect everything else that we do and everything else that we are. And that's what I say to the pastors, in line with the question we were talking about before. How do we get these churches more activated in this election? Well, here's one thought. To those pastors who say, well, I'm not, involved, I'm not getting involved in that political stuff because I'm a pastor. I preach the gospel. I build up the body of Christ. I administer the sacraments. I teach the faith. I lead in prayer. Pastor, God bless you, because that's exactly what God has called you to do. And that's what we want you to continue doing. But if you think that these folks that are running for office, who are willing to eliminate under God from the Pledge of Allegiance, who are willing to actually mandate that people in the faith violate their faith. Do you know that we at Priests for Life had to fight all the way up to the Supreme Court when, under the previous administration, we were given the mandate that in our health insurance plans offered to our employees, we had to include certain forms of abortion in our coverage? We stood up on the day we heard that, and we said no. We will obey God rather than men. And then the government said to us, and it wasn't just to us, it was to practically every employer in America. We were all involved in this. The so-called HHS mandate under the Obama-Biden administration. You know what they said? They had the audacity to say to the religious and moral objectors to this. They said, well, we're going to give you a year. We're going to give you a year to consider how you can accommodate to this mandate. And we turned around that very same day and we said, we don't need a year. We don't need a month. We don't need a minute. We don't need a minute to consider anything here. We know where we stand. We know the moral law. We know our faith, and we're going to follow the law of God no matter what you do. You're going to threaten fines. You're going to threaten jail. You do what you feel you need to do. We're not changing and we're not reconsidering anything. And we fought it all the way up to the Supreme Court. And you know what the problem was in all of this? I sat in these court proceedings and read all these memoranda. And these courts had the audacity to say, when we were describing to them what our problem was with the way this mandate worked, I'm not going to go into all the details, but we told them what our moral objection was, right? You know what they basically said to us? Oh, no, you don't have to worry about that. There's no moral problem with that. This doesn't violate your faith. Excuse me? Who are you? It's not the purpose of a court or a judge or a politician to judge my faith. It's their responsibility to protect it. It's not up to them to evaluate the reasonableness of what I think it means to live as a Christian. It's up to them to protect my right to live as a Christian. And that's why, listen, let me conclude with this. I really don't care. When these candidates come along, I really don't care what they believe. Personally, I really don't care. I mean, as a pastor, I care. But as a voter, I don't care if they're living their faith or not. I couldn't care less. You know, Biden's come along. Ooh, I'm a Catholic. What do I care? Because I'm not electing you to be a pastor. If I were electing you to be a pastor, well, then you better be living your faith. Otherwise, nobody can give what he doesn't have. You've got to pass it along to your congregation. How can you do it if you don't have it? What I'm judging is, can you fulfill the job description of the office you're running for? You want to be a lawmaker? Well, do you know what kind of laws you're going to make? You want to be a president? Can you fulfill the job description of president? And the best predictor of the future is the past. You got 47 years in D.C. Why do you think year 48 is going to be any different? You got 4 years of breaking every record of progress, accomplishing things nobody could accomplish before, even if they said they wanted to. Why is year 5 going to be any different? Best predictor of the future is the past. Brothers and sisters, this has got to be an election about policies, not personalities. This has got to be an election about the future, not the past. About big issues, not what a person said yesterday, but like I said before, what his judges are going to be saying 3 and 4 decades from now. This has got to be an election based on accomplishments, not accusations. Accomplishments. Show me your list of accomplishments. This is what you've got to ask these candidates. Show me the list. Let me read the accomplishments. I don't care what you believe. I don't care what you say. I don't care how many times you've been married. Show me the accomplishments and give me some evidence that if we give you the solemn duty of making our laws, appointing our judges, signing bills into law, if we give you those solemn duties, you give me some evidence that that's going to lead this country in the direction that our founding fathers foresaw. Give me the evidence. Give me the evidence, and then keep your promises. We want to know what it is we should be looking for in a candidate. And brothers and sisters, you tell your friends and your fellow citizens about this. We want to know what we ought to be looking for in a candidate. You know, some people say, oh, the biggest virtue in politics needs to be civility. I don't agree with that. The biggest virtue in politics needs to be integrity, honesty. That you do what you say you're going to do. And you don't do what you said you weren't going to do. You keep your promises. Give me the evidence. Give me the evidence that you're a person that can keep your promises. So, brothers and sisters, my goodness, we get people to think big. Don't let them be distracted by the silly things. This is about what kind of America we want to be. And I am confident. I really am confident. First of all, I think the other side has gone so far over the cliff, so far into extremism. We focused on abortion tonight, but listen, on every issue, Do we really want socialism? Do we really want, all these other? I think the left has gone so far into extremism that we have got right now an American public that has said, how the heck did we get here? We don't want any of this. We don't want this. I think there's going to rise up from the heart of the American people over these next 60 days such a strong revulsion against what they see going on that they say, we don't even have to think about the choice here. It's obvious. The other side has done our work for us. They made it so clear. Brothers and sisters, let's not miss this moment. God has put you in this moment in American history to reach certain people, to influence certain voters. And let me tell you, this might sound like an exaggeration, but among the people who can be reached by those of us just sitting in this room right now, never mind all our friends who are watching right now on social media, let's just talk about the folks whose faces I see right now. It is not an exaggeration to say that the circle of influence that we in this church right now have can be the determining factor in this election. This was the state, was it not? In 2000, that unforgettable election, a few hundred votes. That's one church on one Sunday service. It can happen again. And it can literally be what you decide to do tonight that makes a difference that's just beyond words. God has the victory. The battle is his, and he will manifest that victory. Thank you for having me. God bless you.
Oh my goodness. Amen. Thank you, Father Frank. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Let's bow our hearts and pray. Father, we thank you, Lord, for this great message that we've heard tonight. We thank you for the just the questions and the responses, Lord. And we thank you that you're a God that heals. You're a God that restores. Thank you, Lord, that you are for our country, Lord. We pray for the United States of America. God, that you would guide us, Lord Jesus, that you would speak to the hearts of people. They would respond to your word and to your truth. In the name of Jesus we pray. Amen. Amen. Miss Gail, if you could come to the keyboard. Amen. I'm going to ask everybody, if you would, to bow your hearts before the Lord today, just in reverence to the Holy Spirit. I'm asking you a very important question. I made a commitment to the Lord when we started this church that I would always give an invitation for salvation. No matter what would happen from this pulpit, whether we would be speaking about forgiveness, speaking about love, no matter what, when I closed the service, I would ask for everybody to make a decision in their hearts. If you were to die today, do you know for sure you'd go to heaven? One of the biggest deceptions in America is the thought that good people go to heaven. Heaven was not created for good people. It was created for forgiven people. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no man comes to the Father but through me. And I don't know everybody in the room right now, so I'm going to ask everybody just in prayer, if you're not sure where you would spend eternity, could you acknowledge that by saying, hey, I'm not sure that I'm ready for heaven. John 3, Nicodemus came to Jesus and said, what must I do to enter into heaven? Jesus said to him, you must be born again. And I'm going to ask right now, if you know your life and you are the only one who truly knows, but if you've not been born again, would you just lift your hand to the Lord right now and just hold it up in reverence to God and say, God, that's me. Amen. It seems everyone here has a good peace in your heart with your salvation. Could everybody just slip your hands to the Lord right now? Father, we thank you for your love. We thank you for your faithfulness. Lord, we pledge our hearts, God, to do our part, to share the gospel everywhere we go, to share your truth. And we give you the glory for it. In Jesus' name, amen. Let's just worship the Lord just for a minute, if we could, Miss Gail.
How great is our God? Sing with me, how great is our God? And all will see how great is our God. You're the name above all names. Oh, you're worthy of all praise. And my heart will sing how great is our God.
Amen. You know, Priest for Life is sharing this message all around the world. And Father Frank has been doing his best to give his life to a cause. And he's asked us to fill out a card so we can stay connected with him. And if you take the time to do that, we'd love for you to do that. On your way out, there's a little gray box there. They're on the front here as well. They're just joy baskets. And if you would fill that card out, maybe slip that card in that box or set them right there by the box, we'll get them. But in that little joy box is an opportunity for all of us to give something. One of the most amazing things, a man of this caliber who has an office in D.C., has, how many staff did you say he had? 50 staff members working in his office. Never one time did he ever mention to me how much to give him. It never asked for anything. Just, I'll come. And I want to be such a blessing to him and his ministry. And so if everybody would just, there's a little envelopes in the back by the table there. If you could fill out, if you put it on the screen here, guys, there's 3 ways to give at Destiny. You can give online. You can give by credit card. There's so many different ways that you can give. But we'll tally it all up after the weekend and make sure that we get everything to him that's given. And if you're making a check, you can make it to Destiny Church Naples. We'll get 1 check to him and to be a blessing to him. And we'll also send an offering to Avita King as well. But we thank everybody for taking your Saturday to be here with us. Father Frank will be delivering the message tomorrow morning in both services at the 9 and the 11 o'clock service. And we thank you, everybody, so much for being here tonight. And I want to tell you, I love you more than pizza, buddy. You're the best. Oh, my goodness, we're so blessed to have you here. And I'm so looking forward to tomorrow morning. God bless you, everybody. Thank you for coming. Byron and Erica, thank you guys so much for being in the house. We're honored to have you here with us. Amen. God bless you, everybody. Don't forget to fill out your card and put it in the box.